going on? This is Tariq Nasheed. I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii. We are putting together a project called Hidden Colors, the untold history of people of Aboriginal, Moor, and African descent. It's a documentary, and I'm getting some of the best scholars around the country to really break the game down. In this documentary, we're going to talk about the real history of Christianity. We're going to talk about how there were great, vast African empires. We never hear about this in school. We're going to talk about the African presence in Europe, African rulers in Europe. We're going to talk about the presence of people of color here in America before Columbus. We're going to talk about the real Aboriginal people of places like here, Hawaii. One of the reasons I wanted to do this documentary is because I was watching the History Channel, and they were doing a special about people who came to the Americas before Columbus. And they were not 100% accurate with what they were saying. And they were going out of their way to not talk about the African presence in America before Columbus. So I knew right then and there I have to do something, because we always talk about how people should tell the real deal about history, and we wait on other people to tell our story. So it's really up to us to get it together and tell our story in our own words and just tell the truth. There's a lot of untold history that we're going to cover in this documentary. And I got a lot of people that I listen to. I got a lot of people that I look up to be a part of this documentary. So check it out. You can get more information at hiddencolorsfilm.com. And the documentary is going to be very good. So stay tuned. We're going to keep you updated every week with the progress of the documentary. I'm going to be traveling around the country, talking to different scholars. A lot of people are signing on to be a part of it. So I'm very excited about that, and you're going to be excited about it. And again, I welcome everybody's support to make this thing a success, because this is going to be the first of its kind. So check us out at hiddencolorsfilm.com.
To know your history is everything, no matter who you are, especially black, because you're constantly being told that you were nothing but a slave. Constantly. No one began as a slave. That's not what God put you here for.
If you know anything about the history of slavery, that's the first thing that they did. They beat your history and your native tongue out of you. And what's amazing about America, even the state of Texas, the school board is now expunging slavery out of the books, so they won't have to be held accountable for what they did.
It's going to be difficult for people to prove intellectual inferiority. That's why even in our textbooks in school, they don't like to teach our children about black inventions. Because even greater than our African history are our American inventions. Because from nowhere, you're coming up with things that revolutionize the American social and economic order.
Well, basically, there is a proverb that says that the only thing that peoples of European descent ever created was the patent office, because they stole everybody else's ideas and put their name on it.
During slavery, because you were the property of your master, a lot of what we invented was automatically given credit to the master. The credit was forwarded to the master because we was property. We weren't allowed to take fame or notoriety for the things we created.
It definitely took a toll on black male-female relationships, especially in the 1960s, because in the 1960s, black men and black women, they were doing what they were supposed to have done for a long time, which was fight together against white supremacy, against racism. And they were doing this with the civil rights movement. So what happened, people had to come in and infiltrate and have a divide and conquer strategy between black men and black women. In 1964, government came in and they pulled black women to the side, and they started to classify black women and women in general as minorities. In 1964, that's the first time they classified women as minorities. So they started to give them set-asides and benefits, and then they created the feminist movement. And a lot of sisters branched off into that, and that kind of created a rift, because a lot of sisters stopped fighting for civil rights and they started to fight for women's rights. But women's rights weren't being jeopardized in the black community. Our first priority was racism, and we should have dealt with that first.
We wanted to be free. We didn't need Any boundaries? Need no man to tell us what to do? Well, we hadn't had no man to tell us what to do anyway. You couldn't tell us what to do in slavery, so who, we didn't really have no fight with you about that. That was the white woman's fight with her man, but we took it on. I want to be free. Ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. And then women started having babies, what they call out of wedlock, and then that got to be okay too. Oh, it's all right. Once it got accepted by society, all of the rest of the people, then it was okay then to just have a baby. In fact, I don't even want him for nothing but to just have a baby. And then we started saying, oh, I'm gonna be the mother and the father. All kind of nonsense. And so what happened was that movement, and there never was a sisterhood in the women's liberation movement between the black woman and the white woman.
Because you have to understand, in the tactic of the art of war, when you want to destroy a stronger enemy, you have to get rid of the cultural perspective of authority. So what do? You have to destroy the man in the society. And that's exactly what they did. I talk about this in my book. You have to destroy the masculine principle, which is the head of the family. That's part of it. The other part is to get rid of the environment and the ways and means for the head or the authority of that family to become and stay the authority and the head of that family, and that is to be the provider and the protector. Take away his means of providing, take away his means of protecting his family, and he no longer has any rights or any kind of power. So when you have done that, you have now undermined the glue that keeps a family together. Men don't have to be men anymore. So what's the best thing to do? Since you're giving so many favors to women, I might as well be a woman.
If whites are involved in their genetic survival and they are threatened by black male masculinity, then it will occur, I have to reduce his masculinity. Yeah, we just recently had the president at Morehouse have to say the male students cannot wear high heel shoes and dresses and carry purses. So something is happening, again within the total context of a system of racism, white supremacy. Neely Fuller, who wrote the textbook for victims of racism a number of years ago, in the late mid-70s, he used to say in the system, because he was the first person to talk about racism as a system, and he said that as the system of racism, white supremacy moves on, the system is going to have black men wearing dresses. Now, to hear that in the 70s, people said, oh, this is way out. And here we are. You see, there's some black pediatricians who are saying we are developing epidemic levels of the effeminization of young black males. Well, I say the pants sagging down is just a subconscious invitation for homosexuality. You see, it's revealing the buttocks. See, so the pants are getting lower and lower and lower. The next step is to step out of the pants altogether. And so you step out of the pants, you're going to put on a dress. The effeminization is an essential ingredient of white genetic survival, and the only thing that can prevent it is black people becoming conscious or becoming determined that this is not going to happen to them, because if the black men are destroyed, then the black people are gone, and we have the state of genocide.
It's like when I see that they put every black man in the movies in a dress at some point in their career, I'll be connecting them down like, wow, all these brothers gotta wear a dress. This happened to me. I'm doing a movie with Martin.
Yeah.
The movie's going good. So I walk in the trailer. I'm like, man, this must be the wrong trailer because there's a dress in here. They come in. The writer comes in. I think he's the writer. He's like, Dave, listen, we got this hilarious scene where Martin's sneaking out of jail. So he disguises you as a prostitute. And he put this dress on. And, huh? What? A prostitute? Nah, I'm not doing that. I don't feel comfortable with that. That should have been in the discussion. What? You don't feel comfortable with it? I mean, it's a hilarious bit. All the greats have done it. So, well, if all the greats have done it, it's kind of hacky, right? You're right. So why don't we just not do it? Because I don't feel comfortable wearing a dress. Oh, come on, Dave, listen, we got it all set up. We're supposed to shoot. Every minute you waste costs this much money. You know, the pressure comes in. He said, I'm not wearing no dress, man. I'm funnier than a dress. Just give me something funny to say. I don't need to wear no dress to be funny. What am I, Milton Berle? You know, we're going like this. And then finally he's like, and he leaves. And then, like, the director comes, Dave, it really would be great if you wear the dress. What is wrong? What is this, Brokeback Mountain in here? So then, wear the dress. I don't want to wear the dress. I want to wear this dress. You know what I mean? This is, oh, gosh, this guy's so difficult. They leave. Now the producers comes, come on, David, would be so great. I mean, and then I started thinking about it. All the comics that I've seen, man, you know, strong brothers, why they be putting us in these dresses? But the minute it was clear, I was adamant, I'm not wearing a dress. I'm not wearing the dress. All right, fine. Think of something else. Guy comes back 10 minutes later, the whole new scene. Hot damn, how did you write the scene so fast? You know, it's like, so you gotta take a stand.
A lot of people don't know the original design for the Statue of Liberty was a black female. As a matter of fact, in a museum in New York, you can see the original design of the Statue of Liberty, which is a black woman. When the French artist created the Statue of Liberty, it was supposed to represent the end of slavery. On the original model, there were chains on the hands and feet, as we know. When the statue got to America, they wanted to erase any references to slavery from the statue, but the artist really fought to keep the chains on there because this is your art. You don't want people tampering with your art. And if you look, the chain is still on the foot of the Statue of Liberty to this day.
Well, the story was that it was a gift of the French to the slaves, and that the original statue had the picture of a black woman, the original model for it, and it had a distinctly African face. But it was Europeanized because the people in the United States did not want to have a black face sitting up there in their harbor, so they carved it out. In France, they had to go back to the drawing board and remodel the face after the what they call the patron saint of Manifest Destiny. So the patron saint of Manifest Destiny, that's her face on the what they call the Statue of Liberty, which was transposed from the African face. In fact, you see the patron saint of Manifest Destiny in the symbol for Columbia Pictures at the beginning of the movies. That's the patron saint of Manifest Destiny. Post-slavery Africans were consolidated. They were more together than ever. Segregation gave them the necessity, or created the necessity for them to maintain a type of cohesion with each other, no matter if it was infighting. They still had their self-interest and the collective interest. So we didn't know who the enemy was back there. Today, after integration, we don't know who the enemy is anymore.
The Council of Nicaea was an effort by Constantine to control the people through military and through religion. Whoever can control your concept of God has a weapon more powerful than any physical weapon, than any sword, any gun, any atomic weapon. Whoever controls how you relate to the unseen presence of God will not only control you, but can control your children and your children's children. So it was at the Council of Nicaea that Constantine, this emperor, needed to find a way to consolidate his power, because the people that he conquered in various parts of the world had different religions, different ideologies. And it was at Nicaea where he brought together these theologians, these scholars, if you will, to hammer out one uniform theology that everyone would follow.
And if Constantine could convince people to take Jesus as God on earth and change that he was a human being, then they could take over the control of the Catholic Church and make one. So they invited. And one of the priests was an African known as Arius. Bishop Arius. There's a book called Blacks Who Died for Jesus by Mark Hyman. Gives the story of Arius. Arius now gets word that Constantine knows Arius is coming to dispute this. Because he's saying, how are you going to tell people this? Nobody's going to believe that story. That Immaculate Conception? Come on, you know, that's written on the walls of Egypt. That's a mythology, that's an analogy. You're not supposed to believe that story. That's a nice story to live by, that each and every one of us has Jesus within us and every birth is an Immaculate Conception. But there wasn't no one boy born as the Son of God to free. Come on, you can't. Constantine said, look, come on over here, Nicaea, I'm going to talk to you. He found out that he was going to be assassinated. So he fled into Europe with his followers. Arius and his followers became known as the Aryans. Wouldn't Hitler have a heart attack if he knew who the real Aryans were? They were a bunch of black folk.
Everybody who was worshiping Isis and dealing with mostly a Kemetic religious philosophy, they said, we can't do this. This is ridiculous. This reminds me, there's no man called Jesus Christ. We ain't never heard of him. Well, Jesus Christ will take Hesus, which was the sun god in the west, and we'll take Christos, which was the sun god in the east, and we'll put them together. We'll have a name. And so what did he do? A man named Apollonius of Tyana, at that time, who had studied philosophy in Kemet, was teaching. He was a healer, working miracles. He was a hero at that time. So he became the template for Jesus Christ.
Ending slavery was not the reason a civil war was fought at all. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into unison with the North and to destroy the economic advantage that the South had due to slavery. They cared nothing about the lives of black people. They cared nothing about the way that we were treated. They cared nothing about African life. It was not about protecting us because they had somehow waken up and realized that we were human beings too. No, the South was growing too powerful.
Christ, what a stink, Captain. What did you bring, a cargo of rotten meat?
What do you mean? This is all prime beef. They stink because they eat like pigs, then they vomit all over themselves.
Long voyage?
95 days from the Ivory Coast.
Don't you ever take them up on deck for a little fresh air?
With all the frigates nosing around these waters like hungry dogs. Times have changed, Mr. Sims, now that our damn Yankee government considers this cargo contraband. If they catch me with even one nigger on board, it's up the rope I go, and I wouldn't be the first.
They're bound to rot away down there in that cesspool.
Not on your life. Aboard my ship, hygiene's the rule. That means a clean ship, clean cargo. When one of them gets took bad, I don't wait till he plagues the others. No, sir. It's into the briny with them then and there. Captain Wicks delivers the goods in perfect condition. Anyone will tell you that.
How many head you got?
326, including the wench. This batch is all stallions. No syphilis, and they've all busting with seed.
During slavery, there was something called the Seminole Wars. There were many slave rebellions in this country that a lot of people don't talk about. In the 1800s, there were really a lot of slave rebellions, and people were very nervous about what was going on, what had gone on in Haiti, because Haiti had made themselves independent by having a big slave uprising. There was the Nat Turner Rebellion in the early 1800s. People were still shook about that. You had the Denmark Vesey. He was going to have a slave rebellion in South Carolina. That got foiled, but they had up to 9,000 people ready to put in work. So a lot of people were very nervous about slave rebellions in this country. The Seminole War, it was a war of Native American and black people mixed together, calling themselves Seminoles, because there's no such thing as a Seminole Indian. A Seminole Indian, it's a made-up term. A Seminole basically means runaway by definition. A lot of black people were fighting for their freedom. The image of black people just sitting around waiting on people to free them, that's an image to keep us submissive.
It was also not economically feasible because of the rebellions that were going on. See, we're not talking about just slavery. We think there was slavery and there was a couple of rebellions like Nat Turner, who, by the way, my wife is a descendant of Nat Turner. And they were thinking that it was just Nat Turner. They were burning and destroying, and there was true guerrilla warfare going on.
Ending slavery was not the reason a civil war was fought at all. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into unison with the North and to destroy the economic advantage that the South had due to slavery. They cared nothing about the lives of black people. They cared nothing about the way that we were treated. They cared nothing about African life. It was not about protecting us because they had somehow waken up and realized that we were human beings too. No, the South was growing too powerful.
Capitalism started to rise. But what began to happen is that in capitalism rising, it began to stifle capitalism, because capitalism demands, as an economic system, that people are always trying to rise to the higher. They're competing. Competition fuels capitalism. But if you could buy an African for $300 and then pay somebody for 20 years $300 a year, which would you do? You'd buy someone one time for $300. But that's going to stifle capitalism, because what's going to happen is there's going to be no competition, because what European is going to compete for a job that they could buy an African to do? So the North said, look, enslavement of African people is stifling capitalism. And so the South said, so what you want me to do? They said, well, you got to free your Africans. I said, free my Africans? Well, how am I going to get my money? North said, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. They said, we don't trust you. No, we're not going to sell our, we are not going to stop enslaving Africans. We're just not going to do it. North said, but you have to, because it's going to stifle capitalism, and we're going to choke with overproduction without an ability to sell what we're South said, but that's not my problem, because I can sell my raw materials any place in the world. The North said, but then what would happen to us? We have factories. The South said, well, that sounds like a personal problem to me. I don't care what happens to you. North said, but you can't do that. South said, we're going to do that. We're not freeing Africans. They said, you got to free Africa. We're not freeing. In fact, the South said to the North, I'm tired of talking to you. I'm going to secede. I'm not even going to talk to you no more. In fact, I'm not even part of what your colonies are anymore. North said, you can't do that. South said, watch. That started the Civil War.
Well, one of the big things that occurred right at the end of the Civil War was that Europeans began to form unions. In fact, the workers' union is an outgrowth of slavery and the Civil War. When it looked like the cause was lost for the Confederacy, white men began to organize themselves into labor forces. Why did they do this? Because you are about to see 2 million enslaved Africans set free who have skills that equal or supersede your own, who would now be able to compete and vie with you for contracts and livelihood. That was a significant area of concern for white men. Okay, so if I was a European who was looking for work, couldn't find any because it had already been hired up to the slaves of a certain master. So when the Civil War came about and when slavery was about to end, that intensified, because now slaves would be aggressively looking for work, because when slavery ended, they had nothing to which they could claim their own to make a living. So that bothered Europeans, and they set up agreements, okay, with those who had industries and those who had stores, that you could only hire someone who was white who belonged to a particular laborers union. In fact, some of the first unions were started right here in Pennsylvania. And a lot of black people fail to realize the origin of the union. The union is nothing but a collective force of white people who are protecting jobs for themselves and keeping them away from black people.
One part of the religion of white supremacy is to sacrifice certain people and sacrifice their lives for the sake of your religion, to show your dominance in your religion. And this is what the white supremacists, they do with melanoid people all around the world.
We are this beast that they are afraid of, and they have to destroy in order to protect themselves, protect their women, by extension protect their country. So the more white folk in America become a minority, the more afraid they're going to be, the more reactionary they're going to be, and the more they're going to see a need to circle the cultural wagons and take us out. This is their last stance. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you really understand the essence of white supremacy, they have to do that. In their minds, they have to do that, because to submit is to die. So they are like a caged animal, or an animal that's been trapped in a corner. They're going to do everything within their power to survive. And if we understand that, and understand this is the mentality that we're dealing with, then our reaction has to be a different reaction. You know, we can't react to everything that they do if we understand their mindset. We have to know how not to provoke them, but there are other things that we could be doing and should be doing in order to maximize our presence, right? And take back our power so that we neutralize them just by our very presence.
In order to maintain a system of supremacy, you have to also maintain that people stay in a position. And if they get too far ahead or make too many forward advances, there's a fear that we're going to lose control. I've even had people say to me, well, if we give, in quotes, black people everything they're asking for, then we will be out of control.
During the Jim Crow era, and this just goes to show how sick the white supremacists are, because black people, we don't understand that they will harm our children just like they'll harm us. And they would have something called the Battle Royale, where they would go get black children who were in an economically deprived situation that was created by the white supremacists, because remember, they create economic deprivation. So they get these people who are economically deprived, and then they offer them scraps in order to entertain themselves. So they would get these black children and take them to these boxing matches that you had a lot of white supremacists watching and paying to see, and watch these kids beat each other up.
Where they blindfold young black males, and it could be any amount of them from 3, 4 to 5 to 10, and they put in a ring or a circle, and they have to fight until the last man standing. So they just beat each other nearly to death, hoping to get whatever little rewards or favor that will come at the end of the day with who was left standing. And that was called the Battle Royal. Jack Johnson came out of that process of the Battle Royal. Our great black heavyweight, first black heavyweight champion of the world, came out of that process down in Galveston, Texas, where he grew up. And that was all through the South as an entertainment mode for white folks to watch black young kids beat themselves into a frenzy while blindfolded, with the hope that they won't get hurt at the end of the day, killed at the end of the day, or might get some pittance of a reward that they could take home and help their families.
When we look at circus clowns, especially the hobo clown, the sad-faced clown with the ripped-up clothes, that came from the white supremacists making fun of black people. At around 1874, there were these two white men who were minstrel show artists, McIntyre and Heath. And in 1874, you remember this is directly after the Civil War. When the Civil War was over, a lot of black people were homeless and destitute, and they would have to ride boxcars and trains all around the country looking for work, and they would wear tattered clothes, and they were just poor, begging and just trying to do whatever they needed to do to survive. And living in a culture of white supremacy, the white supremacists looked at that and said, okay, that's something that we could make fun of. So these two white minstrel show entertainers, they started to dress up in tattered clothes and paint their faces black, and they had these big white exaggerated lips with a sad look on it, because black people were sad at that time after the Civil War because they were destitute. And they made a mockery of this and went around the world and went around the country doing these minstrel shows. And eventually that image went into the circuses, where circus clowns started to do that. And even to this day, you still have these circus clowns with the dark faces and the big white exaggerated lips and the tattered clothes and the holes in the shoes. And that hobo clown image that we see today in circuses all around the world is basically still mocking black people.
There's a pride that comes when you've trained the animal, the same way you train a big elephant and you take him to the circus and you make the elephant do little tricks, and because you control the elephant's mind since birth, you've intimidated the elephant to the point where he thinks that you're actually the superior one in this relationship, when really he could crush you with 1 foot. And that starts at a very early age. You start by shocking him every time he gets out of line. You reward him when he behaves properly. That's exactly what they do to young black men. They are training us like circus animals from a very early age, so that later on there is this pride in showing off the trained animal. Like, look at how high that nigga can jump. Look at how fast that nigga can run, right? But when the animal gets out of line, when the elephant decides he wants to kill the trainer, or he just starts to lose it for whatever reason, what do? They kill him. They take him out.
There's another game that the white supremacists used to play at carnivals called the African Dodger, where they would get a black person and have him stick his head in a hole, and they would throw baseballs at him and try to see who can hit him in the head. And this was entertainment to the white supremacists. Anything that will harm black people has always been entertainment to the white supremacists. This is why lynching was entertainment to the white supremacists. Even to this day, seeing black children get murdered in the streets by the white supremacists with impunity, that's entertainment. This is why these people who do it, they get paid, they get big donation money to harm black people.
Black people who are getting into, jihadism.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Eau Claire High School Theater. The performance of Legacy the stage play will begin momentarily. Flash photography and recording the show is prohibited. Please leave the photography to our professionals. Mobile phones need to be switched off for the duration of the show. There will be a 5-minute intermission. We ask you to be courteous of others and silence your phone now. Don't talk during the show or be too nosy because it can be very distracting. Please be seated now. Thank you.